Hey y'all, I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com, excited to dive into a new art journal process. Today, I'm going to do a little bit of art journaling. This year, the plan is to do a mix of memory journaling and art journaling and just all the things. I think probably the differentiation is going to be memory ones will have photos. Art journaling will be a little bit more open. I'm excited. This is a system from 49 and Market with these notebooks, and I just think it's going to be fun and lighter, a little bit smaller. And so that's the plan for today. Here's what I'm going to do. A double page spread. My art journaling is going to have a little bit more room for journaling. I want this in it for sure. And then I pulled these pieces. These are from 49 and Market. I'm wanting to kind of work with these as well because I was digging the color scheme. Like, come on, that's absolutely beautiful. So we'll kind of see how it ends up. I have all this pretty ephemera too, and I'm excited for the rub-ons and some watercolor. So all that to be said, I am just going to have fun playing in this art journal. We're going to see what comes of it. I will put you all on fast forward. I will link all the things that I used down in the description box below. Otherwise, let's go. All right, so let's start this with some watercolor. I was very interested to see how these pages held up to watercolor. They are much thicker than maybe your traditional traveler's notebook, or even just, they're like a really thick cardstock, almost mixed media style. They held up beautifully. On the back of this particular entry that I'm working on was actually some distress oxide ink that I'd use for blending and things like that. It was wonderful. It held up great. It didn't go through. I'm super pleased with how this came out. So we're starting with just a couple of different colors of watercolor just to set a tone in the background. These actually ended up being a little bit brighter than I intended. They weren't quite the colors that I wanted, but they'll end up being toned down a bit once I add some distress oxide blending over the top. So we're just putting a few splotches almost of watercolor on the page to get started, and then taking that off to the side to dry it. Now let's play with these rub-on images. How beautiful is this particular color scheme? This was the color scheme I was going for. Do you see how the red that the watercolor ended up being was just a little bit pinker than the kind of orangey red that I had going on here? No worries, because we are just going to layer over some of the different parts. So you can see with a rub-on, you just cut out the image that you're wanting, remove the backing, place it on your page, and then you go through with the popsicle stick or whatever you have to just rub it onto the page. That transfers it over to the page, and it's almost like a temporary tattoo situation, except it is permanently on that page. Everything just kind of melts on. It is such a cool effect. It allows you to do neat layering things just like this with the watercolor underneath. It's still such a saturated color that it stands out against the watercolor, but you just get the impression. I love it. I love it for art journaling. I love it in my planner. I am loving rub-ons all over the place. So I'm going to do the same thing in a couple of other spots on the page. We're just kind of bringing in some of the colors that I was looking for. You can see you can kind of mess with the placement, but once you put it down and start adhering it to the page, then you're stuck. I accidentally wasted part of this rub-on. You should definitely cut it off before you start rubbing because it got off onto another sheet, which was super disappointing because I wanted to use that little bit, just like I kind of do with stickers. But we're just going to continue on the page using as much as I can. I'll cut off these little bits that kind of hang over the edge. You can just cut them off there. It's almost like you could pick them off. It's hard to describe what this is made out of. It's not paper. It's not vellum. It's an interesting material that rub-ons are created with. I definitely need a little bit more over here in the bottom right hand corner. This is a pretty big image. Let's save these little bits. You do have to cut off part the paper, but I do save the packaging for my rub-ons. This time I learned my lesson. See how I cut the flat part off in advance so that I wouldn't waste it. you want to save the packaging and the backing, because you don't want to remove all the backing before you're exactly ready to put it onto the page. All right, got the rub-ons on. Now let's play with some ink. Like I said, this wasn't quite the coloring I wanted in the background, but once I used this tea dye Distress Oxide and the stenciling to go over it, it brings in more of the brown, which I think really starts to bring it into more of the tones that I was looking for. So I'm just going to do the stencil in a few spots on the page. I love doing partial stencils where it just looks like it's fading in to what's happening on the paper. I try not to go, sorry for shaking the camera, I try not to go all the way to the edge of the stencil. You can see I'm kind of working in the middle. And this to me adds just a little bit more texture to the background. See how that kind of just fades into the white really gently? Love that. The next thing I'm going to do is actually play with some more Distress Oxide. This time we're going to use Vintage Photo, which is probably my favorite brown to use from the Distress Oxide line. And we're going to bring that all around the edge. And this especially tones down that red just enough, I think, and starts to make it all feel a little bit more cohesive. So we're coming all the way around the edge with that. See how that like just focuses in? You can compare the two sides and it provides a frame for what you're creating, and I think it just looks so pretty, and it goes beautifully right over the top of that rub-on. It's like the rub-on is now part of the background of the paper, and comes together really nicely. So let's just wrap up there. Now I want to bring in this quote. This is an old card from Illustrated Faith, like many kits ago, and I love how it's talking about bold faith. This card is talking about bold faith, and it made me kind of consider boldness. And I think we all have a picture of what it looks like or sounds like to be bold. And I think that that actually might not be true. I think you can be bold in a really quiet way. I think you can be bold in different seasons of your life in different ways. And that's kind of what was on my mind on this particular day. And so that's what I will journal about once I get everything down. I'm just creating a little collage right there, a little cluster of all these pieces. On the edge of this card, I wanted to bring in a little bit more of the brown, so I'm using my dauber right there from scrapbook.com, my little sponge dauber. We're going to dirty up the edge. I do this all the time with ephemera pieces, especially in art journaling. And then I thought, let's go ahead and bring on the same stenciling. We're going to put that in a couple of different places. Perfection. And then I will start to adhere some of these other pieces down. This ephemera that I'm using, again, from that same 49 and Market collection, I will link it down below. I just love 49 and Market. It's definitely one of my new favorite companies. Now, what I'm doing right here, these are pieces that are going over the middle, over that gutter of the page, so that the book will open and close easily. I'm going to go ahead and cut the pieces right here and give just the slightest bit of room right here in the end. If you don't, if you just fold something over, it can start really looking, I don't know, looking rough as you're working in this book and as the book gets bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the pieces apart because I feel like that's going to give me the best opportunity to not have individual pages look odd as I start working through the rest of this book. So let's get this adhered down. Again, I'm just doing ever so slightly. There's just the tiniest little bit of separation. You can't even see it on camera, but I think it's actually going to, in the long run, help with the opening and closing of this book, which, P.S., by the way, look how flat the book is just laying right here. That is perfection. I love that. All right. Getting this quote down on the page, then I'm going to end up grabbing my T-square ruler and adding a few lines for my own personal journaling. Like I said, this book is kind of an everything. So we have, you know, all these art journal aspects, and there might be pages where it's only art journaling, and then there might be pages with memories, there might be photos. It's just going to be a little bit of everything. Oh, before I grab my tea ruler, you guys knew I couldn't do an art journal page without splattering, right? I am adding plenty of water to these Kuretake metallic watercolors to do some gold splatters around. Then I will take this, let it completely dry, and then add the lines for the journaling. And that is going to be it for this art journal entry. I am loving this size. I'm loving this format. It brings me so much joy when I open this to work on it. So this is definitely something that I can see myself keeping up with through 2024. Let me know what you think down below. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. As always, I will link all of the supplies that I use down in the description box below, including this whole setup from 49 and Market. I highly recommend it. I am very much enjoying this whole process. I want to give a huge shout out to my entire Patreon community. Thank you all for being such creative rock stars. We would love to have you join in the fun over on Patreon and check out some of the extra perks that you can receive. There is always a link to Patreon down below. All right, I hope that you have a fabulous day. And as always, keep it creative.